Webster defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
And good afternoon, everyone, for a very special edition of the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network. I'm Kenneth. I'm the founder and senior analyst for this amazing company. My team will have the rest of the weekend off, as it was a very long night trying to get all of the results in for the college football playoffs. And pretty much once we got the final data point of SMU losing to Clemson, and considering how close that game was, I think the committee absolutely got it right, and the correct 12 teams are in the college football playoffs. Had some interesting conversations with a couple of Ole Miss fans, and let me just say this. The committee had already told you that Ole Miss was not even in consideration based on teams that were not playing this week were not going to make the college football playoffs as far as being able to move up their seed. So Ole Miss just didn't really have a path to jump Alabama since both teams weren't playing this weekend. And really, the margin of victory between Clemson and SMU was not going to be enough to knock SMU out. So I'm okay with the 12 teams that we have in the current playoff bracket, and pretty much the way that they're seated is pretty close to what we had here. So if you're watching this live on YouTube or watching or streaming this on Twitter, want to say thank you for taking out time on your busy NFL Sunday afternoon. And what we have on the screen, if you've already seen it, just bear with us, is the breakdown of the 12-team college football playoffs. Clemson and Texas will play in that 12-5 seat. The winner of that game will take on Arizona State. I think Arizona State should have been the 4th seed, and that's kind of where we had them slotted in based on the computer calculations that we use. That 8-9 matchup, Ohio State hosting Tennessee, is also about right. There was a case that couldn't be made that you could flip those two. They went with Ohio State ahead of Tennessee for one reason, and I think that was the close loss that they had to Oregon. When you look at the quality of losses, I think both teams had some really bad losses, but the quality of loss, I think, favored Ohio State over Tennessee. I have no problem with that matchup. We'll be talking about that matchup very soon here, as we're a little over a week and a half away from that game kicking off. Well, about 2 weeks. So that's okay there. SMU being the final team in the bracket as the 11th seed, because we know Clemson got in as an automatic qualifier. We're going to use some college basketball terminology here. Those of you that are familiar with March Madness, that automatic qualifier for winning your conference champion, that's why Clemson is in at 12. The last final bid went to SMU over Alabama. Once again, have no problem with that. Alabama being a 3-loss team, SMU losing 1 game in the regular season. And this is what the committee told us, that they would treat teams that played in their conference championship games differently. I absolutely agree with that. If you're in a power league and your record was good enough to where you should be considered for that, you should be in. So kudos for the committee for having the guts and the ability to kind of get to that point. I'm completely fine with. And then Indiana, while we weren't high on their strength of schedule, what they did was what Alabama and Ole Miss had the opportunity to do. They took care of business based on their schedule. And Indiana did not have any horrible losses. Their only loss came to Ohio State. The committee was not going to ding them for only having 1 loss. And I absolutely agree with that. Only thing I would have liked to see was Notre Dame be ranked a little bit higher. But then again, like I said, I get why they have Texas at 5 and Penn State at 6. Both of those teams played for their conference championship game, and they're being rewarded for that as well. So have no issue with that. So let's run through the bracket once again. So 12-5, Clemson versus Texas. The winner will face Arizona State. That game will be in Austin, by the way. Tennessee travels up to Columbus to take on the Buckeyes. The winner of that game will face Oregon. That game will be in the Rose Bowl. The winner of that game will be in the Rose Bowl. I think Arizona State will play in the Peach Bowl. I have to go back and check that here in just a moment. SMU will travel up to Happy Valley to face Penn State. We'll see how much weather is going to be impacting that ball game. As of right now, we haven't really checked the weather forecast, but that winner will face Boise State. That game will be in the Fiesta Bowl. And then Indiana traveling across the state to play Notre Dame. That winner will face Georgia. So all in all, I think the committee did a fantastic job of getting the seeding right and getting the teams right. Like I said, I get while some fan bases are a little bit bothered by that, but honestly, at some point, wins and losses have to matter. Your strength of schedule, if the teams are equal, then your strength of record and strength of schedule needs to come into play. But when we're talking about a team with 1 loss versus a team with 3 losses, kind of hard to pound the table for your team with 3 losses. I get it. Fans and people that cover these teams have an agenda, and we understand that. We don't have a quote unquote dog in the fight. We're just trying to find out how the matchups, once they're set, and break down the games as they come to us. So that's what we're going to do here, and that's what we're always going to do. So let's talk about the 12 teams in the field, and we're just going to look at their offensive side of the ball here. So let's go ahead and take a look at number 12, Clemson. And kind of like the committee, Clemson was outside of our top 12, and that's why we have them with our rankings at number 19. But being that they were a conference champion, that's why they're in the 12-team bracket. So that's the difference between, I think the committee had them at 16. So we're kind of lockstep with that logic. And just looking at the offensive side of the ball here, Clemson's scoring offense when we adjust for opponents, because if you're new to us here at the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, we don't just take the raw data. We adjust for opponents with every single metric that we use. So that's why we have on the graphic here adjusted offensive points. Clemson offense has really picked it up here, averaging a tick below 36 points per game, 35.8. That's 13th best in the nation. So Clemson has kind of been getting it done here with their offense as of late. Taking a look at their passing game, Cade Klubnik has kind of started to figure things out there at the quarterback position, averaging 275 passing yards per game when we adjust for opponent. That's 15th best in the nation. That run game, 200, let's round it up to 202 yards rushing per game. That's good for 24th. Folks, that is a very, very solid run game there for the Clemson Tigers. When we talk about total adjusted offense, let's round it up to 477 yards of total offense. That is extremely impressive there for Clemson. So we've seen that Clemson has figured out whatever offensive issues they've had. Now we can talk about the quality of opponent that they faced. At the end of the day, folks, Clemson has 2 losses, and both of them are to SEC teams, but they took care of business in their conference. And this is the problem we have when we overexpand these conferences. It's impossible to get a apples to apples comparison because your best teams aren't going to always play each other in these expanded conferences. Let's take Ole Miss, for example, and take a look at their conference schedule. We're not even talking about their non-conference schedule. So as I pull up Ole Miss's conference schedule, and I want you to just circle some of the teams that are on here and who they played, and more importantly, who they didn't play. So Ole Miss started their conference schedule off with a loss at home to Kentucky. They did go to Columbia, South Carolina, and beat South Carolina by 3 touchdowns. Fantastic. They followed that up with a loss in overtime to LSU. And folks, not a good LSU team either. This was a game that Ole Miss actually had the lead in and then failed to close it out in the fourth quarter. When you don't take care of your own business, this is the kind of things that happen. Okay, then they followed that up with a home win over Oklahoma, 12 points there. They beat down Arkansas 63-31. Then they get the home win over Georgia, 28-10. And Ole Miss fans and supporters are banging the table for that one win. That's a very good win. Not going to argue against that. Then here's the problem. They go on the road to Florida, a Florida team that was playing better, but still a team that they were better than going into that game. Oh, by the way, folks, Ole Miss was a double-digit favorite in that ball game. Scored 3 points in the second half. Okay, and then they closed out the season with an Egg Bowl win, 26-14 over Mississippi State. Now, let's talk about who was not on their schedule. Once again, you can't control who's on your conference schedule. Who wasn't on their schedule this year? Well, Alabama wasn't on their schedule. Tennessee was not on their schedule. Texas was not on their schedule. Texas A&M was not on their schedule. Now, going into the preseason, everybody thought that Oklahoma would be a lot better, so that was a game that you were counting on to kind of help boost up the resume. Can't control who you play, but you can't control how you play and what the results are when you play them. As much as I love all of my Ole Miss fans and people that cover Ole Miss, Ole Miss does not have a leg to stand on when you look at what I just laid out there. So that's why Clemson is in. Now, getting back to Clemson here, let's take a look at some of our 3 E's that we look at for each and every team when we kind of give an overall ranking, both of their offense and defense. Like I said, just for this live show this afternoon, we're just looking strictly at the offense. So as far as their effective rankings, Clemson is 11th. As far as their explosiveness on offense, they're 21st. As far as their efficiency on offense, they're 21st. So Clemson's overall offensive ranking, we have them as the 15th best team in the country. Now, like I said, that's just taking a look at one slice of the pie. Now, is that saying that Clemson is the 15th best team in the country? Absolutely not. We're just giving one side of the ball here just as a look ahead to what we're going to see in the college football playoffs. Now, before I flip it over to the next team, I'm gonna just reel off some of their defensive numbers here really quickly. So, as far as Clemson's scoring defense, they're 34th in the nation, 72nd against the pass, 25th against the run. Their opponents are averaging about 346 yards per game. And it looks like oh, you know what? I did jump ahead. Sorry. Let me go back to Clemson here. I was already looking at SMU's defense. So Clemson, let's go back. So Clemson's defense allows about 20 points per game. That's 36th, 350 yards of total offense. And I'm just looking here. Defense is top 30 in most categories, with the exception of their defense will give up some explosive plays. They're ranked 49th in that concern. So what Clemson does really well is they don't turn the ball over a lot and they force turnovers. So right now we have them as the 5th best team as far as that turnover differential goes. So that's how you win ball games when you're talking about what did my team do, or in this case, not do, to make their way into the college football playoffs. Okay, let's go to SMU. And the committee has them 11th. We had them still, even after that loss last night to Clemson, we still have them as our 9th rated team. And it's because you weren't going to get penalized for losing your conference championship game as long as the game was close. Now, had Clemson run away with that game like they were looking to do early in the first quarter, we might be talking a different story, and Alabama's probably sitting in this graphic and not SMU. But credit SMU for fighting back and getting that game extremely close, losing on a late field goal there in Charlotte. Let's take a look at the offensive side of the ball for SMU. They come in averaging, they'll come into the playoffs averaging 36.4 points per game. That's 10th best in the nation. Passing, let's round it up to 273 yards passing. That's top 20. Coming in at number 17. Rushing yards, 170. Let's round it up, 177. That's 53rd best in the country. Total offense, 450 yards there. Looks to be a very competent offense. Will struggle at time, and that's why you see an effectiveness ranking of 43rd. There's some things within their metrics from an offensive side of the ball that just makes them not as effective as they should be when you're talking about a team that scores that kind of point total. There's some metrics that don't absolutely line up with that. So that's what we're seeing there. As far as explosive plays, this SMU offense has plenty of explosive plays in it. 24th and efficiency. Well, when you're scoring 36 points per game, you're gonna find a way to be high in the efficiency rankings. And as far as their overall offensive ranking, 26, and that's about where I would expect them to be, somewhere in that mid 20 range there. Let's take a look quickly at their defense here. Uh, Defense allows about 20 points per game when we adjust for opponent, 34th in that metric. They allow, let's round it up to 346 yards of total offense per game. Don't do a great job of turning their opponents over or taking the ball away there. So that may be an issue coming up for them as they get ready to go up to Happy Valley to take on Penn State. Got to do a better job of forcing turnovers and taking care of the ball if you want to advance in the college football playoffs this year. All right, checking in at number 10 is the Indiana Hoosiers, and we have dubbed this team America's team all season long. Potentially the coach of the year in Curt Cignetti, to go up to Bloomington and to have that kind of record in your first year is quite impressive. And America's quarterback, Curtis Rourke, um, definitely had a banner year coming over from the MAC conference and doing a fantastic job there in the Big Ten at a place that is not used to winning anywhere close to this level. This offense averages right below 40 points per game. That is the third best scoring offense when we adjust for opponents there. They get it done on the ground and through the air. If you're looking at these numbers, 250 yards passing per game, almost 176 yards rushing per game. Phenomenal numbers on all accounts there. This team is really good on third downs, 44%. That is a number that I absolutely like and something that they're going to have to rely on here in the first round of their playoff matchups there. Do a really good job of protecting the quarterback. Only 18 sacks allowed this year. And if I go back and look, I think that want to see how many sacks that Ohio State have in their matchup, because that was really one of the better defense that they played against. That's what I thought. So Ohio State got 5 of those sacks in one game. So Curt Cignetti, you will have to do a better job in the playoffs of protecting your quarterback, because we know there's going to be a step up in competition now that we're in the playoff bracket here. As far as their offensive E numbers, third best in effectiveness, 16th best in explosiveness, and 5th best in efficiency. That's how you're a top 10 offense and score at the rate that you do. You're not committing a lot of penalties, forcing yourself into third and longs. You're extending those drives, and as you extend those drives, you're able to close those drives out with touchdowns. That's the mark of a really, really good run offense by any team. Taking a look at their defense, under 20 points per game allowed. That is phenomenal. Giving up about 288 yards of total offense. Again, phenomenal. Want to take a look back. How many yards did Ohio State put on this Indiana defense? Not much more than what their average is. So Ohio State had 316 yards of total offense. Their average is 288. So not a big jump there. So even when they stepped up in competition, it wasn't that their defense got whitewashed in that ball game. I know the final score was very decisive for Ohio State 38-15. There were some critical mistakes made by Indiana in that ball game to where that margin of victory turned out to be what it was. All right, coming in at number 9 as far as the bracket goes, and that is the Tennessee Volunteers. And a quick hello to my good friend Julie Volves. Her and my good friend Matlock host a fantastic radio show from 4 to 6 p.m. Central on wearesportsradio.com. Matt Locked and Loaded. Julie Volves, we talked about this possibility that Tennessee would likely not be able to host, and that was one where it truly was a coin flip by the committee. I think that they got it right, even though we have Tennessee ranked 7th. You'll see where we have Ohio State here in a minute. So we think that the committee absolutely got it right. I know that's not the thing that Vols fans want to hear. We'll get into why going on the road, going to Columbus, may be the better thing for Tennessee. We'll talk about that next week on the big show as we get ready to break down these 4 first-round games. I don't think it's such a bad thing you having to go to Columbus if you had to go on the road. All right, so let's talk about this Tennessee offense right here. Right around 32 points per game of total offense. And Tennessee, even with that blowout win of UTEP towards the end of the season, able to put up 36 points against Vanderbilt. And folks, this Vanderbilt team is not the Vanderbilt team of old. Beating Vanderbilt was actually a good thing. When you look at how well they played teams week in and week out this entire season, that's not an insult saying that you put up 36 against Vandy, because quite frankly, not a lot of teams hit that 30-point plateau there. So we know that Tennessee struggled against Georgia in that defense there. Just want to take a look back at that game and just kind of see where their offense was compared to what their numbers are popping up here. So we talked about it. They averaged 32 points per game, only scored 17. Now, here's what would concern me if I was a Tennessee fan. We were 10 for 18 on third down. Typically, when you're over 50% on third downs and you only have 1 turnover, probably should have found a way to win that game. So as I look here, Tennessee got off to a 10-0 lead. Georgia comes storming back in the second quarter with 14 straight points. Tennessee kicks a field goal to take a 17-14 lead. Georgia closes out the first half with a field goal to tie it at the half. And then Tennessee could absolutely muster nothing in the second half, outscored 14-0. So Tennessee did not make the necessary adjustments in the second half. And when I look at this Tennessee offense, there's quite a few things that stick out to me. So they're averaging 406 yards of total offense. Okay, not bad. They're averaging 200 yards rushing. Okay, that's very good. Tennessee is only averaging 207 yards passing per game. That's 78th. I'll have to double check, but I think this may be one of the passing offenses that, of the 12 teams in the playoffs, I think Tennessee may find themselves as one of the lowest in that category. I'll double check that before the big show, but that's one thing that stands out to me. Another thing that stands out as I get the arrows off of here is Tennessee did not do a great job of ending drives with touchdowns. When I look at that number, 33.7, that sticks out to me. So basically, a little over 1 out of every 3 drives, Tennessee ended with a touchdown. you would expect a team that scores 32 points per game to have drives ending with a touchdown somewhere in that 40 percentile. So that's telling me probably Tennessee got some really good turnover luck. And what I mean by that is they were able to get turnovers in their opponent's end of the field and convert those into touchdowns. And when we go back and when we look at this Tennessee season, I think that bears out the turnover luck that Tennessee was able to enjoy as far as where they were able to force those turnovers absolutely paid dividends for the Vols this year. And that's a sign of really good coaching and good execution there. When you're able to force turnovers and capitalize, that is the sign of a really good team there. So once again, if I'm Tennessee, I have no problem with where you're ranked and how you're ranked. I would just be concerned about some of the offensive metrics here. So they're outside of the top 35 in every offensive category. Not really efficient, not really effective, and not really explosive. When you're going to be facing an offense when they're able to put it together like Ohio State, that would probably concern me just a little bit. Not saying that Tennessee can't win that ball game, but they're going to have to perform better than what their metrics are showing. All right, we talked about their opponent. Let's get to Ohio State here. And Ohio State come in at number 8 for the committee because we didn't slot or anything like that. We still had Ohio State at 6, and Ohio State comes in averaging 36.7 points per game. That was 8th best as far as scoring offense goes. Let's take a look back at what they did against Michigan, because we've talked about how this team struggles with teams that are physical on the offensive defensive side of the ball. And for Ohio State, 4 consecutive losses to Michigan, I think extremely bears that out. When you're not able to control the line of scrimmage, it's really difficult to win ball games when the weather starts to get a little bit colder like it does in Central Ohio. So let's take a look at their season numbers and what they did against Michigan. We talked about it. Almost 37 points per game. This offense could only muster 10 points at home against Michigan. Passing, they averaged 267. Against Michigan, only 175. So almost a 90-yard drop-off from what their average is versus what they did against a really good defense there in Michigan. Not an elite defense, but a really good defense. As far as the run game, Ohio State 188 yards against Michigan, and those 2 talented defensive tackles there for Michigan, only 77 yards. So over 100-yard drop off there. As far as total offense goes, 455 yards of total offense. Ohio State could only manage 252. 200-yard drop off, folks. You want to know why Michigan was able to dominate Ohio State for the 4th consecutive year? Take a look at the offensive side of the ball. Now, when we look at their overall metrics, Ohio State's right about where we thought they would be. Um, very, and this is what I pointed out with Tennessee. Look at the drives ending with a touchdown graphic here. Tennessee was probably about, I want to say over a 10-point difference as far as their drives ending with touchdowns, even though their points per game is pretty similar. That would concern me if I'm a Vols fan going into this matchup. And when you look at Ohio State's 3 E's, their effectiveness, efficiency, and explosiveness, all in the top 10, a couple of them in the top 5. That's why this offense overall is third best. So why did they struggle against Ohio State? Against Michigan? Poor game plan, poor play calling, and poor execution. We'll see if Ryan Day, with a couple of weeks to kind of start to prepare, can him and his offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly, come up with a much better game plan for a Tennessee defense that will play defense extremely, extremely well. Let's take a look at that Buckeye defense here really quickly before we move on to our next team. 10 points per game allowed. They only gave up only gave up 13 against Michigan, so that's about what they average. 141 yards passing, 112 yards rushing, 253 yards of total offense. Ohio State's lights out on defense. Really, they don't make a lot of mistakes on defense. So whatever Tennessee gets in this ball game, they're absolutely going to have to earn. I don't think this is going to be a game where you can count on big plays from your offense. If you're Tennessee, you're going to have to grind it out and gut it out if you're going to go to Columbus and get a win. All right, let's take a look at Notre Dame here coming up. And the Fighting Irish, we had them ranked a little bit higher. We understand based on the committee restrictions that Notre Dame could not be higher than 5th. And once we kind of saw how they were going to see the runner-up in the Big Ten and the Southeastern Conference, Notre Dame being 7th was about as high as they were going to go. And this is the problem with not being in a power conference, Notre Dame. Yeah, you get to host a game opening weekend. You also have to play on opening weekend. And the one thing that Arizona State, Boise State, Georgia, and Oregon don't have to worry about, they don't have to worry about losing in the first round of the college football playoffs. All right, let's take a look at this Irish offense. Folks, I think you'd be surprised to know that Notre Dame is a top 5 scoring offense in college football. But when we adjust for opponents, 39 points per game, that's 4th best in the country. That is more than respectable there. Passing, what I said about Tennessee, Notre Dame looks to have probably one of the worst passing teams in the college football playoffs. Only 191 yards passing per game. But boy, do they make up for it with a devastating ground game. 245 yards rushing per game, 5th best in the nation. That's numbers that we would expect service academies to have when they were running the triple option and didn't throw the ball at all. So the fact that Notre Dame's able to rack up those kind of rushing numbers tells you how good this Notre Dame offensive line is and how good that rushing attack is as well. trying to look for some key indicators here. Almost 50% of their drives in with a touchdown. That's what I call being a very efficient offense. Doesn't always have to be big plays. It's, can you get the ball into the end zone? And when you're getting the ball in the end zone almost 50% of the time, I know it says 48, but that's really impressive. They don't give up a lot of sacks. Only 15 sacks allowed this year. So if you're expecting Indiana to pressure the quarterback a lot in this ball game, the numbers do not bear that out at the moment. Effectiveness, they're outside of the top 30 in that regard, 38th, but everything else with inside of the top 20. That's a really good offense. Let's take a look at their defense. Defense allows about 15 points per game, 168 yards passing, 135 rushing. Their defense is elite. I will say that. Their defense is elite, and they force turnovers at a very high clip. Notre Dame plus 16 in the turnover differential. Folks, you want to talk about how you can basically almost run the table, being plus 16 in turnovers? That's a very good indicator there. All right, let's get into the top 6 here, and that is the Big Ten runner-up in Penn State. James Franklin, as much criticism as he has earned, and I didn't say get as much as he's earned, I would definitely say that offensive performance last night was not what I expected. 37 points against what I feel like is still a really good Oregon defense shows that offensive coordinator Andy Kownecki, coming over from Kansas, did a tremendous job of getting big plays in that ball game all night long. And that's something that Oregon is going to have to address in their couple of weeks off before they play in the next round of the college football playoffs. Taking a look at these numbers on the season and what Penn State did last night against a quality team that they could potentially face in the playoffs. All right, so Penn State adjusted points per game, 29 points per game, 47th. Well, they outperformed that last night to the tune of 37 yards. 240 yards passing. They were on par with that. 226 last night against Oregon. 188 on the ground. They over exceeded that. 297 yards on the ground. Our breakdown did not anticipate that last night. So credit to Penn State for having a very big time game rushing the ball. Third down conversions, we thought they would have to be lights out in this game to do so. Over 50%, that would definitely qualify. So they outperformed their 43% average last night as well. They don't give up a lot of sacks. Now, we talked about it. This Penn State offense is not explosive. 42nd, I should say. And when I take a look at how many explosive plays they had last night, quite a bit. Looking at 3 big-time runs, Katron Allen, a 32-yard run. Nicholas Singleton, a 41-yard run. Even Drew Allar had a 22-yard run. They were able to hit some explosive plays in the pass game, something that Penn State has struggled with. 3 big-time pass plays over 20 yards. Tyler Warren had one for 28. Singleton had 1 for 22. Evans had 1 for 22. And if you add in Harrison Wallace's catch for 16 yards, this team was doing a phenomenal job of making big time explosive plays, both in the run game and the pass game. Oregon, you got a lot of work to do if you have any hopes of winning a national championship. Overall, Penn State's offense, 24th. What would concern me about this offense, I should say, can they find those same explosive plays that they had in the Big Ten championship game? Can they find those in the first round of the college football playoffs? We will see. Taking a look at that defense, opponents are scoring about 17 points per game, giving up less than 300 yards of total offense. Very good on third downs. Their opponents are converting only about 34%. Need to do a better job of forcing turnovers. They're only +3 in that margin. So need to do a better job of forcing turnovers, and that'll give you an opportunity to win in the college football playoffs. All right, let's get now to the SEC runner-up, and that is the Texas Longhorns. And so Coach Sark should be absolutely sick in the fact that they lost that game against Georgia yesterday. And the reason I say they should be sick, they did not take care of opportunities that they had in the first half to put this game away. 6 points in the first half. Not going to get it done when you're talking about trying to beat a team the caliber of Georgia, especially with that defense. And when you go back and look at their drives in the first half, okay, so interception on the first drive. Second drive, 9 plays, 64 yards, took up 4 minutes off of the clock, got the ball down to the Georgia 20, inside of the Georgia 25, could only manage a field goal. Same thing with the next drive, 14 plays, 56 yards, took up almost 7.5 minutes off the clock, and could only muster a 42-yard field goal. Next drive, 8 plays, 51 yards, missed a 42-yard field goal. So this team just did not take advantage of the opportunities that they had in front of them. And this is what I say about championship teams and championship coaches. Good coaches find a way to win games that they shouldn't. Kirby Smart is the best in the business right now. And it's because he has now won 2 games this year that he absolutely had no business doing. The game last weekend against Georgia Tech, this weekend for the SEC championship game against Texas. When I look at Texas's numbers here and compare them to what they did against Georgia in the rematch, let's just see what they bear out. So Texas is averaging, we'll call it 39 points per game. That's 6th best when we adjust for opponents. They only scored 19. That's basically cutting their average in half. Passing 276. Now, they were able to pass the ball quite efficiently, going for 358 yards passing. Take a look at this next number, though. There's the problem. Texas relies on being a balanced offense almost to the tune of 200 yards per game rushing. They mustered up 31 yards against this Georgia defense. And considering that they didn't do that great against against Georgia the first time they met in Austin, they were absolutely missing Kevin Banks yesterday. But Banks is not the only reason that this Texas offense struggled. Once again, 3 turnovers against Georgia. They had 4 in their previous meeting, so a combined 7 turnovers against Georgia in 2 ball games. Sark can talk about the penalties all he wants to, 11 penalties to 5, but when you're turning the ball over, that has nothing to do with the officials. That has everything to do with lack of execution by your team there. Take a look at third down conversions. This Texas team usually converts 46% on third down. Again, against Georgia, 33%, 6 out of 18. You're not going to win a lot of ball games when you're turning the ball over and you can't convert on third downs. Now, this Texas offense, top 20 in all of our key metrics. Efficient, they're explosive, they're efficient, except when they step up in weight class and play a team like Georgia. Well, guess what, folks? If you have any hopes of winning the national championship, these are the type of defenses you're going to have to find a way to put up points against. Got to readjust the game plan, Sark. Their defense, 11 points per game, second best in the country, only gave up 22 points against Georgia. That is not a horrible point total. About 240 yards per game total offense is what their opponents are at a clip at. Texas's defense, top of the charts in all of our key metrics. Now, we understand the next statement that's about to come out. But who have they played? And honestly, folks, I don't have a good answer for you. If you take a look at Texas's schedule, a okay Colorado State team, a Michigan team that spotty at best, blowout win over UTSA, Texas San Antonio, same thing with UL Monroe, blew out Mississippi State, quite frankly, the worst team in the Southeastern Conference this year, beat down Oklahoma, but we talked about that being the case that Oklahoma was not a really good team this year. Got throttled by Georgia at home, 30-15. 3-point win on the road to Vanderbilt. Crushed Florida. Struggled against Arkansas. Kind of the same muddy performance against Kentucky. Kind of the same performance against Texas A&M. I mean, you got the win, but it really wasn't a quality performance there. So Texas has some things to work on, and they don't have a lot of time to get ready for it going into their matchup in round 1. Now let's talk about the 4 teams on a bye here. And Arizona State has been about as hot as the weather in the desert in the summertime there. So really good job coming off of a absolute beatdown of Iowa State in the Big 12 title game. And honestly, folks, that game wasn't even that close. Arizona State dominated this game from pillar to post. And when we look at their offense, we're starting to see some trends that are matching up with the performance. 31 points per game. They hit 45 yesterday. 226 yards passing. Yeah, they went for 219 passing, so right around that number. Now, this rush offense is one of the better ones in the college football playoffs. 207 is what they average. Well, they hit 248 against Iowa State yesterday. Horrible job by Iowa State coaching in that ball game. No defensive adjustments whatsoever. Talk about third down conversions. Now, not a great performance yesterday. Only 5 out of 12, so below where they typically are, but not too far off. They're usually about 50%. They're just a little bit below that yesterday. All right, now, and this is a little bit of a surprise for me, but this offense is top 20 in all 3 E categories. 14th in effectiveness, 18th in explosiveness, 20th in efficiency, 14th overall offense. This is going to be a problem for teams that will be facing them in the second round. Their defense, they allow 18 points per game. Well, they gave up 19 yesterday, so right on average. 287 yards of total offense. They gave up 341. A lot of that was in mop-up duty yesterday, so I would say they were about on average as that goes as well. Defense is starting to play better. That shows up in their metrics as well. So this is a really good team there in Arizona State. I expect them to be a difficult out for whoever faces them in the second round. Coming in at number 3, fresh off of a 21-7 win over UNLV, and that is the Broncos of Boise State. We know their talented running back, Aston Jeanty, having a phenomenal season. I'm going to talk about the quarterback there because it's going to be Maddox Matson that's going to help this team advance in the college football playoffs. So what did he do against UNLV in the rematch there at home? 18 for 27, 158 yards, 1 touchdown, no INTs. He was able to make the plays that needed to be made in that ball game. And that's what he's going to have to do even to a higher level coming up here in the college football playoffs. 34 points per game. They were well below that, but weather and game control dictated that they didn't need to be any more aggressive than what they were. Phenomenal there. They average about 196 passing per game, 233 yards rushing. Really good offense there. And even when we adjust for opponents on all of our data points here, nothing really sticks out that from an offensive side of the ball that I don't think that this team can compete with whoever they play in the second round of the playoffs. Now, defensively, 25 points per game, 390 yards of total offense allowed. Now, that will have to improve as they now truly step up in competition, because really, you have to go back to week 2 when they faced Oregon, and that was the only really top shelf team outside of UNLV that they played this year. So let's just go back and look at what that team did in that ball game. Now, they put up 34 points per game, which right on their average. They were about 50 yards below their average in passing yards. They only had 148. Rushing yards, they were pretty much spot on with their average, 221 yards against Oregon. We just saw what Penn State did to this Oregon rush defense. Oregon, that is not good. With 2 data points, they're against 2 teams that are playing in the college football playoffs. We'll go back and see what Ohio State did running against you as well, but that would concern me if I'm Coach Lanning there. As far as third down conversions, 9 for 19 against Oregon. That's pretty daggum good there. So This Boise State offense is good enough to compete. We'll find out if their defense is good enough to compete here. Checking in at number 2, and there was a shift in our numbers. That's right. Georgia moved ahead of Oregon as our number 1 overall ranked team. And that's strictly based on the quality of wins that the Georgia Bulldogs have. And it's frankly better than what Oregon has. And if you're doing this on a truly unbiased metric, they beat Clemson, college football playoff team, by 31 on a neutral site. Lost to Alabama on the road. We talked about how bad of a performance that was. Alabama, basically the first team out. Beating Texas by 2 touchdowns on the road. That's another feather. Yes, the 18-point loss on the road to Ole Miss was taken into account. But here's where some more quality wins come in at. Tennessee, 14-point win at home. And then, of course, beating Texas in the rematch there on a neutral site. Georgia's just played one of the best schedules in college football and basically went, let's see, what looks like 3-2 against, I'm sorry, 4-2 against that difficult of a schedule. They should have gotten the first round bye, and whether they're the number 1 or number 2 overall seed is immaterial. I know it's a big deal for fans, but to win a national championship, you're going to have to beat 3 quality teams, if not 4. You go beat whoever's in front of you, and Georgia's done that as well as anybody this year. We'll talk about the Carson Beck injury. So at the time of recording this, Carson just completed an MRI on both his throwing shoulder and elbow. It is unknown his status as they are still evaluating those injuries. And for any Florida State fan that wants to say it's an apples to apples comparison, it is not. We knew that Jordan Travis was not going to be available considering the severity of his leg injury. There was no chance that Jordan Travis was going to be back for the playoffs no matter when they were played. They could have been played in February. He still wouldn't have been ready to go. We will have to find out if Carson Beck can go, because that is unclear. So there is no double standard by the committee favoring Georgia and having something against Florida State. Simply not an apples to apples comparison. And we won't get caught up in that debate, but it was just something worth noting. Georgia's offense, 36 points per game. That's 12th best. 318 yards passing. That's 5th best. We'll see if we have to adjust those numbers with their quarterback. Thankfully, we got over 2 weeks before we have to figure that out with Carson. 150 yards rushing. And just taking a look at what they did in the SEC title game, 141 yards rushing. This was one of their better rushing performances, considering the quality opponent that they played up against. Now, this Georgia offense, as we've seen, areas of concern, of course, the injury to the quarterback, but this team is just not making explosive plays this year, and they are absolutely going to have to get that rectified if they have any hopes of advancing in the college football playoffs. So that will be something to keep in mind there for the Georgia Bulldogs. Of course, their defense goes, any team that's coached by Kirby Smart will play defense. 13 points per game, fifth best, only allowing 278 yards of total offense. That's impressive. Now, we know that Texas went over that, almost 400 yards of total offense, but keeping Texas out of the end zone was really the key for Georgia in that matchup. Now, here's a problem for Georgia, and it's something that cannot bite them in the backside in the playoffs. -1 in the turnover differential. You're not going to advance with that kind of turnover differential there. So clean up the turnovers regardless of who is playing quarterback. Force more turnovers, yes, but also take care of the ball better if you're the Georgia Bulldogs. And finally, the Oregon Ducks. Like I said, they have been our number one ranked team for most of the season. Just got edged out by Georgia. And like I said, that's mainly to do with the strength of record as well as the quality of wins there. Now you're looking, Oregon has 3 quality wins and they're undefeated. But when we look at overall metrics, overall strength of record, which we like strength of record over strength of schedule. It's splitting hairs, but we prefer that metric just a little bit better because it really takes a look at how well your opponents did versus their schedule. We know that this Oregon offense can be absolutely explosive, and 45 points last night absolutely spelled that out. They come in averaging 36 points per game, 275 passing. They were over that last night, 283. Rushing, 199 yards per game. They hit 186 last night. So as far as their offensive output, they were about where they should be. Almost 50% on third downs. That was the case last night, 6 for 13. So a tick below 50% there. So as far as their offense goes, it's everything that we've told you that this Oregon offense could be and would be. Top 10 in every metric, top 3 in 3 of those, including our number 2 overall offense. Problem areas for Oregon, and this is something that Dan Lanning, like I said, must get addressed and must get addressed quickly. They only averaged allowing 15 points per game. They gave up 37 last night. And if Penn State doesn't have those 2 turnovers last night, folks, we could be looking at a different outcome in the Big Ten championship game. 150 yards passing. They allowed 226 last night. Here's the biggest issue. 130 yards is what they typically allow rushing. Penn State doubled that and then some. 297 yards rushing. That's going to be a problem for Oregon going forward if they can't get that cleaned up. Let's see. Overall defense ranks in the top 10 in all 3 metrics. Did not play to that level last night. So that would be concerning for me if I'm an Oregon Duck fan waking up this morning. So that is the playoff rankings. I was trying to pull up and see if I could see any of the chat, but if not, I'll touch on some of the questions or thoughts that I've had looking at the playoff as it's just coming out. Once again, I think that they got the right teams in the college football playoffs. That's first and foremost. I think that for the most part, I have no argument with how they're seated. Could you have flipped Tennessee and Ohio State? Sure, you could. End of the day, it makes a difference where the game is played, but I think that Tennessee may be benefited by playing that game on the road in Columbus. We'll talk about that when we get ready to break down that matchup. As far as anything else that really stands out about the 12 teams that are in it, if I am just looking at the matchups here, especially in the first round in those 4 games, and we already have the initial point spreads, and we've seen some early line movement on these games, and I can go through those with you because we're going to go for maybe another 20 minutes here. Want to try to keep this to about an hour and a half, as I want to just kind of touch on all 12 teams here. So let's just take a look at early thoughts of these matchups. And we're going to start with the game on Friday night, 7 p.m. on ABC. The Indiana Hoosiers will travel to South Bend to face Notre Dame. Notre Dame's right now sitting as a 8-point favorite. And the reason why I say weather won't be a major factor in this ball game as far as the road team not being acclimated to it. Both teams are in the state of Indiana, so both will be more than comfortable playing in whatever elements we'll find there in South Bend. On our Saturday slate at 11 a.m. on, looks like TNT, SMU will travel up to Penn State to face the Nittany Lions. And right now, Penn State sits at about a 9-point favorite in that ball game. We'll see what the weather forecast will hold for that matchup here in 2 weeks. But typically, early morning kickoff, you would expect it to be a little bit cooler. But SMU is going to benefit by that game not being at night, as the temperature will definitely drop after sunset. So I would say if you had to be in a window, that 11 a.m. window would probably be the best one for SMU. At 9-point spread, we'll start to work on those matchups here with the team later this evening. Want to give them a kind of a chance to just kind of rest and relax a little bit. At the 3 p.m. window, the Clemson Tigers traveling down to Austin to face the Longhorns, and Texas sits right now as an 11-point favorite in that ball game. That's an interesting point spread. And around these parts, we like interesting. So I don't expect weather to be a major impact in that ball game, but it absolutely could have a impact on the outcome. But nothing to the effect like what we could possibly see in South Bend or in Happy Valley. And then in the nightcap to close out the first round of the college football playoffs, the Tennessee Volunteers will travel up to Columbus, Ohio to face the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State right now sits as a 7.5-point favorite. That spread is also interesting to me. And again, we do like interesting. Okay, so why do I think that that's an interesting point spread? Well, it's because Ohio State coming off of that emotional loss to their biggest rival in Michigan. We heard the fans for most of the second half saying fire Ryan Day. Ohio State does not get off to a fast start in that ball game. You want to talk about a crowd turning on the home team? You can absolutely see that in this ball game here. So those are our point spreads for the first round. I can't wait to dive into those numbers here in a couple of hours when the team and I get together to start kind of getting ready for putting together all of that. Programming note, we will have a special podcast later on this week. Haven't figured out if we're going to do it Wednesday or Thursday, but we will break down the greatest rivalry in college sports. No, it's not the Iron Bowl. No, it's not Michigan, Ohio State in football. It's not Duke, Carolina in basketball. Indiana versus Kentucky in basketball. The greatest rivalry in college football will be played next Saturday at 2 p.m. on CBS. The Navy Midshipmen coming in at 8-3, taking on the American Athletic Conference champion in Army, 11-1, in the game that is known as Army-Navy. There's no college football game in the regular season, and this is a regular season game, that is listened to around the globe more so than this game. This game will be on every military base and ship around the world. Folks, there's no way you can get a ratings breakdown when you're talking about a military base or, for instance, an aircraft carrier. So I look forward to this game each and every year as I have family ties to both branches. I myself served in the Navy. So it is with great honor and great pride that I break this game down each and every year and looking forward to it. So we're going to have that podcast probably about 30 minutes. If I'm able to get on a special guest for this podcast, I will definitely try to do so. But if not, I will give you 30 minutes of talking about both of these teams and really highlighting the history of this game, as well as two teams that have had a phenomenal season. We talked about Army 11-1 winning the American Conference championship this year, and Navy, who played a fantastic season going 8-3. Nothing to hold your head down as far as the midshipmen go about how your season finished out. So this is always a hard-fought game there in Landover, Maryland this year with the Navy Midshipmen and the Army Black Knights. Once again, proud to do that game. We're going to have some special pomp and circumstances with some of the sound bites that we're going to try to get between now and then. Stay tuned to Crunch Time VIP on Twitter as we will let you know the day and time for that special podcast. Also, we'll probably be back in our normal time slot next week on Wednesday, breaking down the first 4 games of the college football playoffs opening round. So we want to give you plenty of time to absorb all of that information. Folks, it's going to be a lengthy podcast. Even though it's 4 games, we're going to try to beef up the numbers and go even more in depth than we've tried to do so over the last couple of weeks. So we're going to really highlight as much about these 8 teams are playing in these first 4 games as we possibly can, because we want to give you every single possible advantage that we can give you here at the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network. Our website, we're transitioning platforms as far as who will be hosting our website. So the website will be down here for probably another week or so as we kind of get that rebuilt, and we'll start to incorporate some new things into the website that we didn't before. So if you're interested in getting some of our betting breakdowns, please email us here at contact at crunchtimesportsadvantage.com. Once again, that email address is contact at crunchtimesportsadvantage.com. You can also, if you're already following us on Twitter, send me a direct message on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP. We'll set you up with one of the packages. We'll get you the promo rate for not only the opening round, but all of the games in the college football playoffs. And if you sign up before the Army-Navy game this weekend, we'll absolutely include that into your package as well. Want to give you guys everything that we can this playoff season, because there is a lot of good data to break down as we get into the college football playoffs. So once again, email us at contact at crunchtimesportsadvantage.com. You can also send a direct message over on Twitter. Our handle is CrunchTimeVIP. And folks, as we get ready to wrap up this special edition of the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, final edition of the college football playoff rankings, it has been a pleasure on behalf of my entire team, Jennifer, Jessica, Summer, Billy, and myself, putting together all of this college football information this regular season. We are now going to be able to be focused and locked in on the 12-team playoffs. Folks, it's time to get back to work, and our team is absolutely ready to do so. So on behalf of my fantastic team here at the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon if you're watching the NFL or college hoops, as that is starting to pick up. And oh, by the way, we will have a special podcast starting in January where we will be exclusively covering the Southeastern Conference as potentially the best conference in all of college basketball this year. Folks, if you haven't been paying attention, the SEC has absolutely been dominant in the non-conference. Just had the SEC-ACC matchup. The SEC went 14-2 in that matchup against another premier conference in the Atlantic Coast Conference. This is going to be a fun ride. Going to make it hard to handicap when you have so many great teams, but we're looking forward to doing so each and every week. We'll have dates and times for that podcast coming up on the website and on our Twitter page as when the first show will be released. I know conference play starts on that Saturday, so the first initial podcast will likely be that Friday beforehand. We'll figure out a date and time as far as when we'll have our midweek breakdown. What we'll do is we'll look back at the games that were played on Monday and Tuesday, and then a look ahead to the games coming up on the weekend. So once again, looking forward to our SEC breakdown during the regular season. And then we will be doing March Madness like only we can here at the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you coming up later this week for the breakdown of the greatest rivalry game in all of college football, Army-Navy. And as always, everyone, thank Thank you. Take care and God bless.